Hello everybody, welcome to episode 108 of Show Viewers. Today we'll be going over Baki-Dou. Now this like season, though it's just season 1, we don't have season 2 yet, it was phenomenal. Like, this got to be one of my favorite seasons. I know I said that was the last season of Baki Hanma too, but honestly, it would probably be tied for Baki Hanma. Well, honestly, out of like the short, like 13 episode seasons or the shorter seasons, because each Baki series has a long season and a short season, it's probably second best, because season 1 of Baki, like the original 2001 Baki the Grappler, or Grappler, it's actually Grappler Baki, will always probably be my favorite Baki like season of all time. However, this one is a close second place because it was very good. But we start off with getting introduced to this big UEC boxer. No, he's not UFC. I think he is a boxer or a martial artist or something like that. And he is a big time guy. And he gets in contact. He's contacted by Tokugawa, and he's like, "Yo, I want to fight the world's strongest man and the world's strongest kid." And he ends up getting him in contact with Baki, and we see that Baki has been struggling recently with a bad case of yawns. And he just, whatever he does, he can't quit yawning no matter how hard he strains himself, no matter what. He can't stop yawning. So we see him and Atlas go in a fight. Baki easily beats him, and he still is having trouble yawning. But yeah, so after this, we see as some science starts going on. We see as the scientist has acquired the spine of a T-Rex. And he's done much advanced research in learning how to duplicate individuals. Now, the world, science community has a strict set of rules against cloning people. However, this dude wants to go against it. He wants to clone a T-Rex. However, Tokugawa ultimately realizes this dude has a lot of potential, and he's like, "Yo, I got you. I need something." And he ends up taking him to this big, massive science facility that Tokugawa for some reason has. And we see as he's like, "Yo, I have the corpse of Miyamoto Musashi, and I would like for you to clone him." And this instantly lures the scientist and Tokugawa. Obviously, this is like Tokugawa's big dream. He's always wanted to do this. And so they get to working, and he ultimately is able to extract enough biological material and red blood cells from Miyamoto Musashi to create a clone. And we see as they get to work, they get to incubate him. And we see as everything goes about, and we as people are slowly becoming more knowledgeable of this, and Tokugawa's getting more and more anticipation as the time grows closer. Now, people around the world, all the fighters, are still growing very tired, though. They have lost their interest, or haven't lost their interest in fighting, but lost the excitement of fighting because of the father-son fight that happened at the end of Baki Hanma. They've seen something so spectacular that now nothing really excites them. So they go about each their own way trying to figure out how to do this. Jack ultimately ends up extending his height by another couple of inches to 8'1" now, I believe. So Jack's even more of a monster. And we see as other people go about it at very peculiar ways, because Hanayama is affected by the same thing, and he's at the bar with one of his goons, and he's like, if I'm that boring, then you don't have to hang out with me. He's like, "No, man, I just need to get excited for something." And so he calls up Tokugawa, and he's like, "Yo, man, I want to fight Yujiro Hanma." So they ultimately end up setting up this fight, and Yujiro and Hanayama end up meeting up, and we see that Yujiro has actually become very popular among the populace because of his father-son fight. And everyone's trying to get in contact with him, and he's having to wear sunglasses and crap to go incognito. But him and Hanayama end up fighting, and Hanayama gets obliterated. So we still know that Yujiro Hanma is on top. Honestly, I would still consider Yujiro Hanma to be the strongest creature in the world, because he didn't really beat Baki. Baki didn't really beat him, so I'm still considering Yujiro to be above Baki. But yeah, so we see that he didn't barely do damage to Yujiro. But yeah, so we see this. And after that, we also see that Kyoretsu is still doing great in the United States. He's ultimately triumphed over everyone in the boxing leagues of America, and he has done his own thing with Kung Fu and all of that. But yeah, so we see this, and ultimately Miyamoto Musashi, after I think it's 11 months and 10 days, Miyamoto Musashi is brought back to life. Well, not back to life, his corpse is fully cloned. But they take him out of the pod, and he is unable to live. He doesn't have a soul. And Tokugawa was like, "Yo, you idiots, you made the Buddha without a soul." And so he ultimately is like, "Yo, my sister is a medium. She can connect to the spiritual world and stuff like that. And her name is Sabuko." Yeah, Sabuko. Yeah, Sabuko, because I remember it sounded like Zabugo when I first heard it. But yeah, so we actually get introduced to Sabuko Tokugawa, and she is a spirit medium. She's a real deal. No, a lot of people don't believe her. A lot of people just believe she's a sham. She actually does get in contact with the spirit world, and we see this through the example of this like 21-year-old kid who ends up getting in contact with his father's spirit, but his father's still alive, and he reveals that. However, as he goes home the next after that, he learns that his father actually passed out during this time. So she actually has connection with the spirit world. So they bring her in, and they have her perform this ritual, and she ends up locking lips with Miyamoto Musashi and transferring his soul back into him. And we see as Miyamoto Musashi arises in a new cloned body. So ultimately, we see as Tokugawa takes him to his place, and we see as Musashi's like amazed by all the stuff that's around him, kind of like how Pickle was, and just seeing everything new now and all that. But he can speak good Japanese because I mean he comes from the 1600s, and so we see this and all that. And they get to yapping, and ultimately we see as Baki learns of this. Now Baki, he is obviously intrigued by this, and he wants to stifle his yawns. So he goes and meets up with Tokugawa, and he's like, "Yo, I want to fight Miyamoto Musashi. I want to fight the Ultimate Warrior." And he goes and fights him. And Musashi beats him. Musashi beats him pretty handedly too. Like it's not that close to a fight. Now I don't know if Baki was going full out. I don't presume Baki was going full out because we see. Well, I won't actually spoil it yet, but I have reason to believe that he wasn't going full out. So I believe we'll probably see a better fight in this season 2 of this show whenever it comes out. Yeah, he beats him. And then Baki ends up going along the same. We don't really actually see Baki a lot for the rest of the season after this. But yeah, so we see as Musashi kind of just going about, and ultimately one day he ends up going out for a stroll against the advice of Tokugawa, and he just runs into the police, a couple of the police. He ultimately ends up beating them, and then comes back to Tokugawa's place after his outing. And we also see as other people are starting to be allured to this area. We actually get to see some of the characters we didn't really get to see in Hanma. We get to see that Shibukawa is still going about doing his thing. We see that Katsumi's still training. He trained with Shibukawa there for a little bit, and we just kind of see some of those little bit minor characters. We also get to see Motobe again. Izo Motobe hasn't been prominent since like the second season of Grappler Baki in 2001. So they brought him back. I mean, he has a pretty significant part in this season. But yeah, so the next person to fight Miyamoto Musashi is Doppo Orochi. Now they fight, and Doppo gets beat pretty bad once again. Miyamoto Musashi has a flawless record so far. But yeah, so this kind of leads to ultimately Motobe coming in contact and revealing that he believes he is the only one who can fight Miyamoto Musashi because he knows a bunch of dead ancient weapon arts and all of that. So he believes he is the only one who can handle Musashi, and therefore it is his goal and fate to protect the people who want to fight him by not allowing them to do so and beating them, so that they do not end up dying to Miyamoto Musashi, because he believes that he's the only one who can take Musashi. So yeah, after this, we see as Retsu's like, "Yo, it's my turn to fight this guy." But Motobe pulls up and he's like, "Yo, I'm not going to let you fight him." So we see as Motobe and Retsu fight. Retsu ultimately ends up winning. He's like, "I'm going to fight Musashi." And we see as he's training with weapons. Actually, Retsu has a very extensive background with weapons training, which we hadn't really seen a lot of prior. But yeah, it's revealed through the old like Grand Kaio that whatchamacallit, Retsu's been training with like one specific weapon for almost his entire life, and he has been training with weapons for a long time. We actually get to see his skill, and we get to learn a little bit more about the technique that he's been working on learning, which is to make his body like unto a feather so he can't be cut. But while this is all being learned and all that and discussed, we see as Musashi is chilling at Tokugawa's place and he cuts a feather. So there's kind of a bit of foreshadowing. But yeah, so ultimately the day of the battle comes. We see as Retsu and Musashi end up getting in contact at first, but ultimately they don't end up fighting. So Tokugawa sets up a match in his little dome area, where he piles up a big mound of sand, puts a bunch of spears and stuff in it, like the cornucopia in Game of Thrones, not Game of Thrones, Hunger Games, and they prepare to fight. Now this fight was great. Yes, Retsu didn't do a lot of damage to Musashi, but it was a good fight. I really enjoyed it and all of that. And I loved seeing how the teeth were used in the sand, because I love about Tokugawa Stadium is that there's so much like viscera and teeth buried within the sand because of how many fights have gone there. And we actually see the teeth come up quite often in this, and it's just really cool to see because it's an homage to the previous fighters that have fought there and how much blood and sweat and tears have been poured at that place, and like body parts even. See, I just thought that was really cool. But ultimately, this happens, and Musashi handedly beats Retsu, and he does not let Retsu live. This was sad. I was not expecting this at all. But yeah, Musashi and Retsu's like, yeah, finish me. I have been beaten. Do not shame me and let me live. Kill me. And Musashi cuts him down the midsection. His organs fall out, and Retsu dies. I was not expecting that at all, because Retsu had honestly become my second favorite side character, besides obviously like Yujiro. I would say like good side character would be kind of Retsu, because previously it had been Jack, because I just love Jack, because Jack is such a cool, like, out beast of a character. Like, he is probably one of the most dedicated to his craft. Yes, he does take the drugs, but he takes the drugs to be as powerful as he can be. That does not, I mean, that's not to say he doesn't train. He trains a lot as well, as we can see that. He took the drugs because he wasn't getting enough out of his training, so he did this with drugs, and all the enhancements get bigger, and I just like that about Jack. Jack is a really cool character, in my opinion, and very menacing, and I love that about him. But yeah, so we see this, and Retsu dies, and I was just really sad to see, because like we had seen him do so much. He went to the United States and beat all of the boxers, become the kung fu master there, and beating them in their own sport and all of that. And we'd seen a lot of Retsu in the last couple of seasons, but he dies here. I mean, yes, his story is kind of complete. We didn't know where Retsu could go, but I mean, still, he could have done more. But Retsu ends up getting killed. And we see as everyone is very taken aback by this. Everyone's really sad, and so we kind of see as things go around, and ultimately we see as Miyamoto Musashi ends up going back to Tokugawa's place. However, the police pull up here afterward at his house after the fight, and they come in contact. They're like, "Yo, we've news to believe that you were have committed a murder in this area, and we have eyewitnesses who stated it, so we're going to take you in." But ultimately, he ends up resisting. However, he doesn't ultimately end up killing all of them or beating him, and they ultimately take him in. And this is where we get to see episodes 9 and 10 is where we get to see, I think it's 11 and 10, but this is where we get to see Moist Critical's voice acting in the English dub. Honestly, it wasn't bad. Like, as the episodes progressed, like, he was only like 2 episodes, but in the second episode, it was a lot better than the first. But like, I just cannot separate the voice of Moist Critical from Moist Critical. It's like Christopher Sabat and Zorro for me. Like, I could not see Moist Critical, because it sounded like the voice he does when he like mocks someone in a way. But yeah, I mean, it was still okay. I still enjoyed it. But he goes to the police station. They have him fight like this chief dude in this sword style. It's called like Aido or something like that. It's not Aikido, because that's a martial arts, but they use like the reed swords, and there's mentioned to be like super fast, and rather than having the 3-pound weight of an actual sword. But Musashi ultimately ends up beating this dude like that. So yeah, after that happens, we then see as Shibukawa ends up pulling up, and he's like, "Yo, I just wanted to talk with you. Like, I'd be like, yeah, I respect you a lot." And they ultimately like plan to not fight. He's like, "Yeah, I need to absolutely beat by you." So he goes, shakes his hand, and Shibukawa is able to essentially absolutely lock down and pin Musashi off this. And he's like, "No, I did not want to. I want to get my get back on you because of what you did to my good friend Retsu." And ultimately, this ends up leading to a fight afterwards, with Shibukawa ultimately losing, but he doesn't get killed. I mean, I don't know if Motobei pulls up there. That might be what will stop it. I can't, for some reason I can't remember. But yeah, they ultimately end up fighting, and Shibukawa ends up losing, and they have a handshake at the end, and he's not able to flip Musashi again. So yeah, that's where it ends. But yeah, after this, we see as Yujiro Hanma is in town, because he's heard about Musashi and he wants to go fight him. So we see his Motobei pulls up, and he's like, "Yo, you do not need to fight him, because I am the only one who is fitted for beating him, and I don't believe it is a good idea for you to go and fight him." But it's Yujiro Hanma, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go fight him anyways." And ultimately, we see as Motobei has to flee Yujiro's room, because Yujiro gets offended, and he starts to like quake the ground and all of that, because of Motobei's like insolence at presuming that Yujiro Hanma wouldn't win. But then we see as Yujiro Hanma pulls up to Tokugawa's palace, him, Musashi, and Tokugawa share a couple of drinks, and ultimately the fight gets on. Now this is probably the best fight in Baki-Dou. Yujiro Hanma versus Miyamoto Musashi. Like, it was so good, a glorious fight. Like, it was a pretty back and forth fight, but Yujiro, he had the upper hand. He did more damage than Miyamoto Musashi did. However, Musashi was actually able to get multiple slashes on Yujiro. That's only because Yujiro allowed him to do so, to get in a groin kick. So Yujiro would not have been wounded if he would not have allowed it. He had to make a sacrifice to make an impact, and his impact did far more, because he gave Miyamoto Musashi a pain that he had never felt before, as the narrator said, and he only got a couple cuts from it. But yeah, this fight keeps going until ultimately Motobei jumps in the way and enrages Yujiro. He would have killed Motobei right there, but ultimately he is able to get away and not actually get killed. But yeah, so the fight stops there, and because of this, Yujiro is obviously enraged, because he believes he's never had to be protected in his life. Well, and as this is actually what causes outrage in the hotel, but he is out, like, just infuriated that Motobei had the insolence to protect him. But yeah, so after this, him and Musashi end up going for a drink because Musashi had kind of lost his match they was having there, and so did Yujiro. So they go have a drink and all that, and just yap it up a little bit. And then we actually get to see more of Motobe again. Now we see that Motobe goes to his dojo and he meets up with Gaia. Gaia is his student, and Gaia has not really been pertinent since like season 1 of Baki. Like, he's been around. Like, he was there when Pickle was first kind of introduced in his little enclosure and all that because he was hiding behind camouflage. But yeah, so we see him and Motobe meet up, and they kind of talk about why he's defending everyone from Musashi, and they have a brief skirmish, but ultimately Motobe ends up coming out top pretty easily. And then we see that Jack Hanma is wanting to fight Miyamoto Musashi with his newfound height and strength and all of that, his drug pumping abilities. And so we see as he progresses along the way, and he holds up the Tokugawa, and he's like, yo, I want to fight Musashi. And Tokugawa's like, well, you cannot fight Musashi unless you beat Motobe. So ultimately, they have this little idea to walk through a park until they run up on each other. They will not fight, but once they run up on each other, the fight begins. And that was based off of some old tradition with I think it was like a pro wrestler from like the 1800s and another martial artist who did the similar thing. And so ultimately this ends up happening. We see as Jack Hanma fights Motobe. Now, I thought Jack honestly should have won that fight because, I mean, he did very well. Like, he feigned being weak and stuff like that at the beginning of the fight. However, ultimately, he was a very powerful component. Actually, to see as he puts Motobe on the back after Motobe actually knocks out all of his teeth, because at one point, Jack bites into Motobe's shoulder, but Motobe's kind of like the Batman of Baki, and he's always prepared for stuff like this. He knows his opponents. So he put on like some like powerful like Under Armour kind of like chainmail stuff. It's a mesh, and he bit into it and Jack couldn't bite through it. And ultimately we see as Motobe is able to knock out all of Jack's teeth. However, after this, Jack ends up getting Motobe and just pummeling him against a tree. But this ultimately does not lead to Jack winning, and Jack is ultimately I've said ultimately like 8,000 times, but Jack is tied up and Motobe walks away being victorious against Jack Hanma. Now, that's kind of where the season ends. That's predominantly where it did end, and setting up for Motobe ultimately fighting Musashi. And that was a great season of Baki. I love that season. I cannot wait for season 2. I know there'll probably be a little bit of time since Dou just came out like very recently. But I cannot wait for Baki-Dou season 2 because I know it's gonna be peak. I know it'll probably better than even Baki Hanma season 2 because I know we'll get a Baki and Musashi rematch. I'm actually ready to see Motobe fight Musashi because though I'm not a massive Motobe fan, it's gonna be a good fight. It's gonna be really good to see because Motobe has obviously increased his standings within the fighting world because I mean, heck, Jack went pretty well against Pickle and Motobe beat Jack. So I'm just ready to see how that plays out. Oh yeah, also I forgot to mention about Pickle. So we get to like this brief scene in like the last 10 minutes of the final episode of this mention about how these fish have all gone missing and all these trout have gone missing in the Kanabe River. And ultimately it's revealed that a massive crocodile has been eating all the fish here, but Pickle has wrestled this big crocodile, takes it out of the water, drags it into a manhole tunnel, like squeezes it through there, and this is how Motobe remembers Pickle. He's like, oh crap, yeah, I forgot about him, so I gotta protect him from Musashi as well. So we're gonna get to see a Motobe versus Pickle fight. This will kind of be the discerning fight to kind of scale where Motobe is at the moment. This will be kind of be the do or die moment. So yeah, I cannot wait for season 2. That was such a good season. It was honestly, like I said, one of my favorite seasons of all Baki. I know I say this almost every single time after a season of Baki, but it was so good. I cannot wait to see more. But yeah, that's all there really was for Baki-Dou season 1, the first 13 episodes, and all I really have for episode 108 of Show Reviews. So thank you very much for watching.